I want to tell you a story about a pretty big blunder I made when I was a sophomore at Baylor University quite a number of years ago. I was at the apartment of a friend of mine, and he was telling me about a wonderful summer trip that he had taken to Germany. Now, this young man's family ancestry was from that country, and he very proudly showed me a drinking stein that he had brought back that had his family's emblem, or like a coat of arms, on it. And when he showed it to me and handed it to me, I was admiring it, but it slipped through my hands and it fell on the tile floor of the kitchen, and it broke in quite a few pieces. And man, I felt really, really bad. I did take it, and I apologize profusely. I took it back to my dorm and I tried to glue it together, and I brought it back to him, and it was somewhat in the same shape that it started with, but once it was broken, it just couldn't be fixed. Now, that's bad enough when you break someone's favorite family stein, but I want you to think about how some people are broken in their personalities. And near the top of the list of broken people, we're going to say the narcissist is going to be that kind of an individual. These people, life is meant to be lived according to certain principles and standards and values, and these people just don't catch on to the concept very well. There's so many right and proper and good things that can be manifest as we try to live in a healthy way, but these folks are given over to all sorts of unhealthy characteristics, which illustrates their internal brokenness. Now, I want to talk kind of on two fronts here. I want to talk about how that narcissist has a sense of brokenness, and then I also want to talk about how that can help feed or fuel some of the brokenness that's on the inside of you. Now, let's get an idea of how this brokenness might show up and how it might play out. With a narcissist, for example, they show their brokenness by needing to coerce or force people to do their bidding. You see, I'm thinking, if you have to force people to agree with you, do you understand that that's not a very good way to live life? That's a sign of brokenness. They feel a need to be above other individuals. And again, because life consists of the equality of human nature, that need for superiority, that says something's broken there. They can be very thin-skinned and defensive in the way that they receive input. That's part of their brokenness. They can have anger, and lots of it sometimes in the form of rage and harshness. And when you begin looking at what's behind the scenes there, you realize that's connected to their brokenness. They can have anger where they go into a deep passive-aggressive pattern, whether it's silence or withdrawal. They think they're punishing you. That's part of their brokenness. They can be secretive. The implication being, I can't afford to let myself be known. They won't reveal personal things about themselves. They hate feeling vulnerable. That's part of their brokenness. They have a strong critical spirit. And again, when you have a personality where you focus so easily on negatives, that implies brokenness. They have to feel understood. That's part of that coercion, but it implies a feeling of disconnect and emptiness. It's part of their brokenness. They live with a false front. What you see on the outside doesn't really represent what's cooking on the inside. Again, brokenness. They have an unnatural smugness at times, where it's like, yeah, it's me here, and I'm so much better than the rest of you. That smugness is part of their brokenness. It's a cover. They can be vengeful and spiteful. And again, that implies there's something desperately wrong, broken on the inside. Perhaps they go into a shunning mode. You get an idea that when people live with these kinds of characteristics that I just listed off, it implies that something ain't right on the inside. They're broken people. Now, you're on the receiving end of some of this kind of behavior, and before you know it, it can reveal some of your brokenness, and it can bring out some of your brokenness. For example, you as the recipient of this kind of behavior might have a lot of self-doubt and struggle with your self-esteem. That's part of your brokenness. You feel sometimes the need to justify and rationalize who you are. And the deeper you go into that mode, that high defensiveness, that implies your brokenness. Or perhaps you just hide what you really think and feel. It's like, there's no way I'm talking with this person about who I really am. It's because you have a certain element of brokenness there. Authenticity feels strong or difficult for you. Along with that, you can be calculated and guarded in the way that you present yourself. That's a brokenness. Sometimes you can struggle with your own feelings of bitterness and resentment, and the longer those emotions linger, that implies your brokenness. You can have your counter anger to the narcissist anger, and before you know it, you're participating in a broken kind of exchange. Sometimes you go into a bickering and an arguing mode. That's not the kind of person you want to be. That implies an element of brokenness. Sometimes you might go into your anxiety mode, or perhaps you might isolate. Or it may be that you alter some of the priorities that you live with because you're trying so hard to appease that controlling narcissistic person. You too can yearn for an understanding, and you can have an emptiness that you might satisfy in inappropriate ways, so you can have your brokenness. So engaging with a narcissist can reveal much about the less than wonderful condition of human nature. Now, if you try to talk with a narcissist about dealing with this whole sense of brokenness, they're not going to take any kind of ownership of this at all. It's like, I'm not broken, and so I don't have any kind of problems there that need to be addressed. Or if they say, yeah, there's something wrong here, then the next thought is going to be, and it's your fault. And so there's a very low likelihood that that person is going to do a whole lot about their own sense of brokenness. So we come back to you. And I think we wanted to see if we can point out 4 different ways that you can prevent this sense of brokenness from going any deeper than it has to go, and how you can utilize your own strategies so that this brokenness doesn't have to become a defining feature. Now, the first way that you keep yourself from going into a deeply broken relational style is be realistic about what you can and cannot accomplish with that strong, controlling, narcissistic person. Now, yes, there are times when you need to confront that person. There are times when you need to say, this is what does work and this is what does not work. And so assertiveness and firmness and stipulations and boundaries can be in order. But then the rest of the story is, don't expect a high level of coordination and understanding from that person. If you do, that's going to be a huge bonus, but there's a high likelihood that that other individual is going to argue back with you. And when that happens, you just hold your ground without going into all of your broken, unnecessary responses back. Part of your wholeness is when you can have a sense of firmness and security and knowing that what you're saying makes sense and it requires no rationalization and justification, as I mentioned. Now, a second thing that you can do to keep yourself from becoming too broken, and this may sound kind of counterintuitive, embrace the fact that you're broken. And when I say embrace it, what I mean is you don't feel like you have to make extra excuses. Look at your humanity and acknowledge, you know what? There are times when I actually do have some moments where I'm not at my best. And I acknowledge that. And you want to have a certain amount of self-acceptance, keeping in mind the narcissist wants to shame you for whatever flaws you have. And so you feel like you have to cover it up and all like that. You don't have to do that. Rather than accepting their shame, accept the fact that you have your moments where sometimes you're on top of it and other times you're not. And the more you can lean into the fact that you have a certain element of brokenness, strangely, that's how you get beyond it. You accept it, you look at it with as much objectivity as you possibly can, you try to figure out what your alternatives are, and you keep moving forward. And so you're going to go completely counter to the way that narcissist thinks. A third way that you can keep from having brokenness overcome you, and that is make sure you share with other people who are of a similar mindset as you. You know, there are times, you know that the narcissist is probably not going to be able to go to a very deep level of insight and awareness, but there are times when you can find other individuals who say, you know what, I can relate to some of those broken moments myself. And as you're able to talk with those individuals, you feel a sense of camaraderie, you feel a sense of encouragement with one another, and it's like, yeah, that's the way relationships are meant to be. We stimulate one another, we encourage each other, we know and understand each other, and in doing so, we have a feeling of pooled effort and pooled strength as we go together. And then finally, a fourth way to make sure that the brokenness doesn't get all over you, and that is look carefully at the healthy characteristics that can come about in you because of your brokenness. And chief among those characteristics are empathy and encouragement and support towards other people. When you have had some experiences that have brought out the less than desirable characteristics or ingredients in you, then interestingly, you can be that much more poised to show an understanding and acceptance of other people. One of the things that again, a lot of folks have a hard time coming to terms with is when they've failed, then actually that makes them that much more capable of having empathy and encouragement towards others. Acknowledge that and build upon your empathetic skills based on the fact that you do know what it's like to be human and you're very willing to go into that realm with other people. And so you're turning the whole notion of brokenness and failure upside down by saying, yeah, we can do something with this. And rather than looking at brokenness as something that shames you, you can look at brokenness as something that perpetuates growth. Now, just being honest, I don't really like, personally speaking, identifying myself as a broken person, but I have to admit my humanity too. There are moments when I look back and I think, I've had some blunders and miscalculations, but because of blunders and miscalculations, then that gives me that much more of a springboard that says, I want to grow and I want to learn. And that's something that a narcissist can't do. With them, we can try to go glue them back together like I tried to glue back together that German Stein, and you're not going to get a whole kind of a person out of that individual. It's just not going to work very well. But I'm hoping that as you embrace the fact that brokenness is real and you're able to take a non-shaming and objective approach towards that, then you're going to be able to see that the best way to move forward is to recognize that when you fall, then that gives you some excellent lessons to build upon. What are those lessons and how might you embrace the good directive that's going to lead you towards? It's a little bit of a different way of thinking, and I'm hoping in doing so, you can find yourself willing to have a sense of self-acceptance. And I think that's a very necessary ingredient if you're going to have growth. Narcissists, they're not going to understand, but that's a secondary issue. Now, I hope that you gain some benefit from videos such as this. I enjoy doing these, and I really am pleased to be along with you on your journey. And so if you'd like to continue receiving videos, hit that subscribe button below the video. Beneath the video as well, I have some links to some books and some of my online video workshops that perhaps you'd like to avail yourself to. And I just am pleased to have you along here with me on my Surviving Narcissism channel, and I will see you next time.